Good evening, everyone. My name is Sean Fennessy. I'm a senior scientist at the Oceanographic Research Institute next door to Shaka here. I've been there since 1989. It's a heck of a long time. Thanks very much to Wahoo and Louis in particular and DUC for hosting this event. You'll see why, what the talk is about shortly, or towards the end anyway. But yeah, so I've been there for donkey's years. I've worked on a whole range of fisheries and fisheries biology aspects, trawling, a lot of trawling stuff. I haven't worked a lot with spearing, but I've been to a couple of Spearo Nationals when I was working on rock cod back in the 1990s, and I gutted a lot of speared fish, including Jula Plagani. Some of you will remember Jula, a very good Spearo, and I went and sampled some of his catches way back when. So that's my background. You might know, or you might not know, we can go to the next slide. So Ori started way back in the 1960s, and the reason Ori was started was because there was lots of shark attacks off the KZN coast. So the government was concerned at the time, affecting tourism and so forth, but before you can put any management in place, you need to understand the animals and what's going on. So Ori was started for that reason. And this is us here. Okay, and you can see there was links with a whole range of other organizations. This is the 1960s. So they called themselves, what is the Sharks Board these days, was called the Anti-Shark Research Association Limited. And they were based, we were the same organization, but we had links to University of Natal, CSIR, SeaWorld was there, and this is the umbrella body that we belong to, that Ori belongs to. So that's the sort of context. Next slide. And to show you, this is a bulletin from 1965. You can see some of the work that was being done. Final note on Sally the sawfish. We had a sawfish in captivity back then. Sharks of the family Carcharodontidae of the Southwest Indian Ocean. Investigations of skates and rays. Fossil sharks from Zululand. So a lot of shark stuff was going on back in the 60s. Next slide. And our director at the time, David Davies, put a lot of this stuff together and produced this book, Sharks and Shark Attack, which summarized a lot of the information that was known. But there was also a lot of science done at the time. So next slide. So some of these names are pretty famous if you followed shark studies back in the day. So John Bass, Nat Kister, Sammy. So this is John Bass here. This is the old SeaWorld main tank at the top of West Street at the time. There's Nat there, very good technician, and then Jeanette Aubrey, a whole bunch of shark skeletons there that she's dried out, shark skeletons that she's examining. At the time this was going on, they're doing all the biological studies, they realized that people were getting into the water and shooting fish and encountering sharks. So that's pretty much when spearing started in South Africa. It was probably in the early 60s. And they thought Spearos were a good avenue to try and find out about what sharks are doing live instead of just seeing all the dead animals. So they came up with the idea of starting a shark survey, a questionnaire survey, and they were distributed to Spearos of the day. Some of you might have seen this being distributed on Facebook or whatever, but it's quite a short little questionnaire. You put your name down, the date, where you were spearing, did you shoot fish? Did you see sharks? So this is Len Jones. Encountered a great white, or a white I should say. First Carcharodontidae I've seen in Natal underwater. It ate my fish and bit me. So that was a submission in the day. So quite a thing. But basically I encountered all these surveys. They were never worked up or analyzed at all. And I came across them in our basement, buried in all the other data a couple of months ago. And I thought, sheesh, well, this would be quite interesting. So I've worked up all this information, and the idea is to repeat it now, 60 years down the line, just to do a comparison. So we're still early days with that now, so this is really about the history. All right, next slide. So these were all the guys who submitted questionnaire forms in that period, 63 to 65. There's 1,300 outings. Okay, so that's quite a substantial fishing or spearing effort. Some of you will recognize these names, some of you not. So I'll leave it up for a while. I knew this guy. Well, I know of him. I know Tim Condon. Len Jones, obviously, everybody knows. Daryl Smith taught me to scuba dive back in '93. Long past on now. But I was interested to see who these people were. Any of you recognize names? All right, next. Okay, so I did a bit of scratching. I don't do Facebook and that, but I just Googled on the internet and whatever. So a couple of names came up. George Askew was one of them. And there it says George Askew had founded the South African cage diving industry in 1988. So he was spearing fish back in the early 60s. And here's another one. This is from George himself. So it wasn't that long ago, 10 years ago. So I was quite a prominent diver in the 60s and 70s, and I found the first dive shop in Africa, George Askew Underwater. So some of these spearos made a name for themselves over the years. Next slide. Obviously, Len's name came up. I don't know what this site this is, but there's a picture of a couple of the guys, including Len, Gene Franken, and George Askew, some of the top guys. And then obviously Len's books came out subsequently, fairly recently. So those were some of the names I recognized. Next slide. Tim Condon I know because his book is in our library. And he wrote this book, I forget the date, it was probably early 70s maybe, based on his diving exploits over the years. Next slide. And if you see, so there he is there, autographed book as well. So a lot of these names that you saw in the previous couple of slides, there's Gene Franken, Len Jones, Christian Eckhoff, Daryl Smith, Gene Franken, they all contributed to this book. All right, next slide. And there's some of the people that you've seen there. You might not know some of these names, Eric Davies, Gordon Lumley. Looking at a mullet speared by Gene Franken to win one of Durban's first ever spearfishing competitions. So they're a bit hard up then if they're spearing mullet. But anyway, it won him the competition. This is more like it though. DUC members with a good mixed bag of fish speared at Paradise in the early 50s. Okay. And then there's Len with the Wahoo. I think this is Gene Franken at the bottom here with the big kuda. So there's some history in that book. All right, next. And there's lots of little stories in this book. So there's Noel Holliday. He speared a lot, as you'll see shortly. He wrote about his encounters, Gene Franken, ambush at Park Rennie, all these little spearo stories which you guys are still chewing the fat over, I'm sure, these days around the pub or whatever. Next one. And then this is Len's encounter with the white. You can see how close it came to him. We're obviously going for his fish on his belt or whatever. It grazed him. So yeah, got off lightly there, did Len. Okay, so this is some of the stats from those 1,300 spearing outings over the years. So there was about 1,326. There were 45 different spearos. Noel Holliday, 231 outings. Okay, so he was the most avid spearo. Guy called, I forget his first name, Lug, one of the Lugs. I think it was, I forget Peter Marlin's name. Len Jones is up there, about 7% of the outing. So those were the guys who submitted the most forms. Not necessarily the guys who speared the most, they submitted the most forms. All right, next. So in those 1,300 odd outings, there were 2,600 fish speared, or reported speared. So pretty much 2 fish per outing, average. But look at Len's average, 7.3 fish per outing. He streaks ahead of the rest. Okay, everyone else is around 2, somewhere around there. On those outings, 688 sharks were seen. So sharks were seen in about half of the outings, or reported seen. Okay, Len Jones was seeing about 1.6 sharks per outing. There was another high-ish one here. Yeah, so I think Anthony Hay Buchanan seeing about 1.5 sharks per outing. So yeah, sharks were around, no question. About half the outings, guys were seeing sharks. All right, next. So everyone says or thinks, if I spear a fish, I'm going to attract a shark. So this is a bit of science. So this is the number of sharks here. This is the number of fish speared per diver. If you look at that, okay, first of all, 0 fish speared, they were still seeing sharks. You don't have to spear a fish to get a shark. You'll see them without it, okay? If you spear 3, 4, 5 sharks, fish, you start to see more sharks. But the more fish you spear, the fewer sharks you see. I don't figure that out yet. I'm still trying to think about it a bit. But it's not straightforward that if you spear a fish, you're going to see a shark. There's a good chance, but it's not 100%. Okay, next. What is this? This is distance from the shore. So a lot of shore entries in those days, as you can imagine, there weren't nearly as many ski boats. So most guys fishing or spearing in around about 200, 300 meters offshore. They were using yards in those days. A couple of guys went further offshore. They were scrounging boats off to Allowal or whatever. So a couple of guys went a couple of k's offshore. But most guys then stuck inshore, as you would imagine. Okay, next. This is depth. So similar to shore, they're not fishing, they're not spearing very deep. They're sitting around about 20, 30 meters. A couple of guys went really offshore. I think they were contracting for, I forget who, but they went quite far offshore. So they were open water or blue water. But that was the exception. You know, most guys were sitting around about 20, 30 feet of water, pretty shallow. Okay, next. This number of sharks against depth. So again, nothing really clear there. So you're getting a bit of a spike in sharks at around about 30 foot. So about 10 meters of water. So they're fairly close inshore. But yeah, you're getting some out in about 50 foot as well. Don't think there's too much of a story there. Some in fairly shallow water, but not that much. Okay, next. Where were they spearing? So Cozy in the north, down to a couple of places down south. So mostly around Belito and Shlote and Schlonga. Maybe that's the case today as well. I don't know. Durban's still popular, or was popular, and then Park Rennie's a bit of a spike there. Anybody here know of Bermuda Reef? I asked Jeremy Davies, but he hadn't heard of it. He said he'd spread the word. So there's only 1 or 2 outings there. I think one of them was Lens. I don't know where Bermuda Reef is. And Brindle Reef. Anyone know where Brindle Reef is? No. There's only 1 or 2 from there as well. So they're mystery sites. Okay, next. Right, this is the most complicated one you're going to see tonight. So we can take our time and go through it. So the blue bars are number of fish speared over the months. So this is all 3 years aggregated together. So there's a spike in July. Fish speared, so that's probably Garrick. Okay, and the forms seem to suggest that. Often on the forms, they weren't asked to fill in what type of fish. It was just asked of them, did you spear a fish or not? So, but I suspect some guys were putting in the comments, Garrick, 3 Garrick, blah, blah, blah. So I suspect a lot of that is Garrick, but you get some other gamies coming through at that time as well. So fish speared, peak in July. Sharks seen, not quite matching. It's in June. Their peak is in June. So not quite aligned with the number of fish speared, but definitely a peak in the sort of late autumn, early winter. Less so in August, September, but that's probably a function of how much diving took place then. Number of outings, diving to spear. So sort of lowish, yeah, and then like peaks again in the sardine season, early winter. And then drops off again, probably with the windy months, August, September, October, and so forth. If you look at success, fish per outing, that's the blue line. So that bounces around a bit. So you're getting a bit of a peak in February, March, another peak here in July, and then another peak here in November. So you guys would probably know. I'm guessing a bit, but yeah, some of your summer game fish, there's the Garrick peak, and this might be the early coup de darts coming through in November. I don't know. But yeah, so some seasonality there in the success of fish per outing. Sharks per outing sort of bounces around a bit. Yeah, a little bit of a peak early in summer or late summer, peak here in June, and then drops off a little bit here in the windy months. So I know this is problematic. Identifying sharks even out of water is difficult, let alone especially the grey sharks. So this is what the guys thought they saw. Couldn't really separate blackfin and black tip, so I just added them together. So most were the blackfin, black tips. Zambies were plenty. Duskies, greys, potentially the same as duskies, I'm not sure. Unidentified sharks, quite a few. Raggies were around, the odd hammerhead. There were 12 other species, one of which there's a couple of guys saw makos. I think there was a thresher. Can't remember. There's about 12 other identified species that were seen. And so the other thing, I put a little star there because guys would dive together sometimes and they would each fill in a form. So those were all counted as individual outings. I mean, they weren't like arm in arm diving, so one was there and one was there. So they each submitted their form. So I counted those as separate diving, but sometimes they were seeing the same sharks. Difficult to tease that apart, really. So it's perhaps an overestimate. Yeah, I'll figure that out further down the line. Okay, so I think that's pretty much the bulk of it. So what I'm doing now, thanks to Louis' help and you guys' help, is that I'm trying to repeat the survey after 60 years. I'd like to try and get as many forms in as possible. If I can get sort of 500-600, that's a reasonable number. I don't want to run it for 3 years. I'm retiring in November. I'm going to get it done. So if I can get 500-600 responses from guys, I'll be quite chuffed. I think it'll give us a bit of a statistical validity to compare the two data sets and just see, have there been changes? You hear about the ski guide guys complaining, hey, the taxman is here all the time, much worse than it ever used to be. But we've got no hard information to show that one way or the other. This might start to feed into that. So yeah, so there's, I can send you the link, there's a QR code there. You can do it on your phone, it's pretty straightforward. What I've got so far, since I think it was late January we started, there are, I think it's 40 spearos currently who've responded at least once. And I've got about 105 surveys back. So this talk is to try and boost the enthusiasm, explain what I'm trying to do, and hopefully in a year's time, or just less than a year's time, I can do a comparison and then come and give you the results to see, have things changed? Could they have changed? Why have they changed? All that sort of stuff.
Hi guys, I hope you enjoyed that video. This was a talk given by Sean Fennessy about shark encounters with spear fishermen. Stand by for the next.